All right, so what's going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Full Circle Podcast. It is your favorite brother, Joseph. As always, I have a couple of things I'm going to announce today before we go right into the show and everything we're going to be talking about. Before I do that, thank you to everybody that watches our podcast, that subscribes, that follows, and shares this with friends. If you are one of those people that just has been watching the show, or someone shared this with you, or it may have popped up over on your timeline, your feed, whatever, what are you doing? As I always say, go ahead and subscribe to us, share this with a friend, like, and give us a comment at Full Circle Podcast on TikTok and at _ Full Circle Pod. Or it's actually at Full Circle Pod on TikTok and at _ Full Circle Pod on Instagram. So you can do that. Go ahead and subscribe to us here. Share it with a friend. As I always say, it is free to support a nigga unless you want to do more, and we appreciate everything that y'all do. So get busy on that. Secondarily, I have, for any of you that have been watching this from the beginning, I have started off in many ways talking about self-help, and of course, just that was the bulk of a lot of things that were talked about. I haven't strayed from that, in case you guys were wondering. But here on the podcast, we talk about self-help, current events, and culture, okay? And we really want to talk about it with common sense and clarity. That's been our goal from the beginning. But with all the things that have been happening in the country and the world, it's pretty much impossible for me not to lean into that with the knowledge that I have about politics and just my interest in the subject, as well as just making sure that people are informed. However, because of the fact that I care very deeply about self-help, and I also care about politics, film, a variety of topics, what I'm going to be doing now is doing 2 episodes a week. And we're going to start trying this out, seeing how this format works now that I have a little bit more time on my hands. So Friday's episodes are going to be all about self-help. And then Wednesday's episodes are going to be all about these topics that we're going to be having here. So I hope that you will tune in and pay attention to that. Okay. And then, of course, we'll just continue to have comments that people write in. And I hope that you will write in and share your comments on what you are seeing either on social media or on our YouTube channel as well. So subscribe to stay updated on all of that. All right. So just getting into the topic today, it's been really interesting because I haven't done a self-help kind of video in a while, but this has been something that's really been happening in my own life. And I think that it's something that I've been hearing a lot of my friends and just strangers talk about. And I wanted to share it with y'all today. So if you're out there and you feel like you're at a weird kind of like crossroads where you're trying to figure some things out, I feel like this episode is going to be for you. If you have figured out what you want to do, but maybe you feel like they're just adjustments that are taking place in your life, I also think that this is going to be something that you will be able to find some sort of relevance in. Last night, I was at my friend Jess's birthday dinner, and it's crazy because Jess and I have known each other for, I think it's like maybe 13 or 14 years. We met back in 2013 in college. And so I'm just sitting there we used to all live in Chicago. Her and I used to go to school together. And then we, both ended up, going to the same church. And we've just been friends for like a really, really long time. And then, of course, she's become a friend of the family and of all my friends. But the crazy thing that I noticed as I was sitting there and I was just talking to her last night was it's incredible how time can fly by and you have the same people in your life and you're living those same memories, but then you get to watch all of these different people that are so integral to your life at different stages of the game. And that was something that really just stood out to me. We were obviously all sitting there at the table, making jokes, talking about, all the experiences that we've had before, all the history that we've all had together, and just, of course, looking forward to what we want the future to be. And it was so weird to me to just kind of sit there in that moment and think to myself, it's so crazy how much time that you can spend with people and the growth that you watch them have and the growth that you have over a period of time, and how it's really not helpful to look at anybody in any sort of linear fashion, because we all can change, we all can evolve, and we all can grow. And then I just was sitting there at the table, almost kind of in like this, it's kind of like a moment where I was there, but I wasn't there, kind of having an out of body experience there. And I just started thinking to myself about the friendships and the relationships that haven't carried on, or at least, in my awareness right now, we never know who can come in and out of our lives or return to our lives, right? Almost kind of like what Marvel is doing right now with the MCU. Oh, this person died. Oh, oops, they're back. Or you see a lot of that stuff in a lot of, films where they're like, oh, just kidding. This person didn't really die. They're coming back, right? But it's really, really interesting for me kind of going through that process and thinking like, we don't know what the future looks like, and we can only project things based off of the reality that we're in, the current understanding that we have. And so the thing that I think is so pivotal to us making decisions about who kind of stays in our life and who leaves, it's all surrounding this idea of growth and what we want in life. And so I made a couple of notes here. I really just want to share some of those notes with y'all briefly. So let me go ahead and pull these up actually right now. And the whole concept of growth, right, or the whole thought behind growth is typically surrounding where you see yourself and the limitations, or at least either the limitations, the boundaries of where you see yourself at, or where you want to expand to. And maybe you're looking at that in a kind of like a simultaneous way. Maybe you're not isolating that view to yourself. I do know there are a lot of people that they'll do that. They will kind of isolate where they are and the people that they're around, and they'll say, okay, well, I only want to be doing this at this point in my life. I feel maybe a little overwhelmed and I don't want to do any more or any less. But then there are other people that are looking at their life and they're saying, well, I feel like I've reached all, these goals that I've had in my life, and I don't, maybe I want to kind of not expand out any further. Maybe I want to keep these, keep the relationships that I have and keep growing those. And then there are folks that are like, well, I'm still trying to reach a little bit higher or further than I ever have, but I also want to prioritize the people that I have and build something with them. And so I believe what we're constantly looking at in our life is going to be this: how do I change? How do I grow? How do I expand? Who to bring along with me as part of that journey. And so that's what I want to lean into today, essentially, is growth, what growth looks like, how sometimes growth can be lonely, and how that can really spark the change that we're experiencing in our lives. And so I do believe, just kind of taking a zooming out perspective on it, growth in many ways is celebrated in theory, but it is lived in solitude, right? Like we talk about growth in our culture. We talk about growth as being a very, very beneficial thing. But, when we're growing up, when you're in high school, or when even before that, middle school, kindergarten, whatever, there are markers. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but there are markers of growth in our life. So when you're younger, it's like, oh, I'm going to have my first day of school outside of the house, right? That's a point of growth, right? And then you go from there to like, okay, I'm going to go to middle school. You go through all the, first couple grades, then you get to middle school. And then that's usually marked by puberty. And then, for girls, they have a sweet 16 here in the United States, quinceañeras. If you are in the Latino culture, bar or bat mitzvahs in Jewish culture. And there's just many other ways to signify the growth that takes place in our life. Then, of course, there's graduating, from high school, or getting your driver's license, or going to college, whatever you name it. But I think that once we get past college and we start establishing our careers, there are not a lot of spaces that we actually have that facilitate our growth. And so we have to almost, as human beings, kind of make this bucket list of things that we want to do to set up the growth for us. But it feels very lonely, I think, in a lot of these chapters of our lives, because We have societal standards of how we're supposed to grow, like, maybe getting that career after college, finding the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, obviously making the money that you want to make, or being solidified within your career. And so we always are kind of running into these things that are just kind of like they're scraping up against what we expected life to be, and then what the reality of life is, and then also what we want for life. So you have the expectation, you have the realization, and then you have the graduation point to what you want life to be. And those things are constantly going to be either in conflict or symmetry with one another. And so I think that we have to at least start with the point of outgrowing people. And the way I can kind of sum this up to y'all is it's very difficult sometimes when you have been hanging out with folks that they're the same as you, or, they're on the same page and they want the same things. When people want the same things as you, they tend to celebrate the same things as you. They tend to be in the same spaces as you. They'll show up to the same parties. They'll show up to the same events, or the same friend groups, house parties, cookouts, whatever you want to name it. But as you start to decide, hey, I want to decide to do this thing for myself. I want to start my own business. I want to pursue my own career. Many times people might celebrate you in the outset, but as you begin to pursue that, as your presence begins to be less amplified, as you begin to take more time to yourself, sometimes those very same people will take it personally. And I can speak from experience. When I decided that I wanted to start acting school 2 years ago, there were so many people that were like, hey, bro, that's amazing. That's fire. That's dope. I'm behind you on that. Like, go for it. But very, very quickly, when you can't show up to the events that they want you to show up to, when I couldn't show up to all the parties, all the friend events, and, all of the get-togethers, pretty soon those people stopped reaching out to me. They stopped checking in. They stopped asking if I was doing okay. They stopped inviting me to things. Now, reasonably so, you might think, okay, maybe it's just because they think, hey, this nigga's busy. Like, he ain't going to show up to nothing. But I very, very quickly began to recognize that there were people in my life that just didn't understand what I was doing. They didn't understand why I didn't have time to get together, because I was in class for 6 hours. And yes, some of our classes lasted 6 hours and beyond on a Wednesday and a Saturday, or a Thursday and a Sunday. Or it was just because they took it personally, me not responding to them, because sometimes I just felt so overwhelmed with not having, or not feeling like I had enough time to just sit and be by myself, And so I think if you're an ambitious person out there, and you're not just going with the status quo that maybe some people are doing, where they have a career, they have a job or something, and they just go to work and then they come back home, which, if that's you out there, if your life consists of going to work, going to the gym, coming back home, watching movies, making, food, and then hanging out with friends, and you live for the weekend, if that's your lifestyle, cool. Like, I mean, I'm not going to judge you in this or say you should change it. But I do believe that so much of us out there are not just looking to punch a clock or fill out a timesheet and hit the gym and then, watch Netflix or cook food from home or, order Uber Eats every single week. I think there are so many of us that we do have bigger dreams. And so sometimes you find yourself feeling like you're outgrowing the spaces that you're around, not necessarily because you want to leave these people behind, but just the things that you desire in life start becoming, incompatible with where you're trying to go. And so I do believe that, from a bird's eye view, a lot of our culture in many ways, a lot of the people that are living in this world right now, but specifically young people and our culture, growth is celebrated in many ways for what it produces, but the process of growth is not usually one where we have conversations about feeling understood and make that feel like a place where we all can feel like we belong, in the unexpected parts of that journey. I don't want to get super statistical today, because we do a lot of that on the Wednesday show. So I kind of want to keep it a little bit less with the statistical data, but I do want to back what I'm saying up by just some statistics here that I see of people experiencing this. So I pulled this up for y'all, and I just want to go over it really quickly. When I was looking at just emotional well-being of people, specifically as people feel lonely and isolated, because a huge part of growth can feel like you're alone. And I did a little bit of just some research here, looking at the Pew Research's website. And it basically says that, and these are just different demographic groups. We're just kind of go through this right here. It basically says, to better understand Americans' well-being, we asked U.S. adults how they feel lonely, or about how they feel lonely or isolated, and how often they feel this compared to those that are around them. And what they basically were saying was the following groups that feel lonely or isolated all or most of the time are adults that are younger than 50, adults with some college or less education, lower income Americans, and adults that are unpartnered or living with a partner they're not married to. Okay. Now, it says that a majority of adults, 58% of them, say they feel optimistic about their life all or most of the time, while 32% say that they feel this way sometimes, okay? Now, it looks like they're basically saying that people that feel most optimistic in this group are also those that are above the ages of 50 or older. They have a bachelor's degree or higher education. They're upper income adults, or they're married adults. So we can see there is kind of a correlation between feeling like you have control over your life. Usually people that are in their 50s or older have lived a little bit more life. They're more secure in their financial career, and they have a partner to kind of weather these storms with. However, I think a lot of us can relate when we say that this is in some degree where we fall under that, group that's under 50 years old. Maybe you do have some college. Maybe you couldn't afford to go to college, or maybe you had a family member that you were taking care of. And so you decided, hey, I'm going to drop out and focus on this. Or you might be pursuing a career in an artistic area, and you maybe don't want to go to school to pursue that career, or you just find that school is just way too expensive and there's a lot of knowledge out there. The thing is that in our culture today, we have been in many ways sold this belief that it's super cool to kind of like be on your own, to be alone, to kind of go for that lone wolf thing. Women are being told it when it comes to like, yo, you can be, a baddie and go and work the corporate world out there on your own. And, there's a lot of stuff out there about like, hey, why date a man today? What's the point of dealing with all that? Because of, men are just, if you go look at TikTok, there's a lot of stuff that's trashing men and trashing women on TikTok. But there's a lot of stuff where people are just saying, hey, like, go at your own, like, hot girl summer. Or there's a lot of guys that are out there that are kind of on the red pill, or I think it's like red pill or like black pill. The black pill thing, where it's all about like being an alpha, or realizing that like, hey, don't try to like date out there in the world. Just kind of go and pursue your thing, or, disconnect yourself from society and disappear to become the smartest person in the room, or to become the strongest or the alpha. And there's a lot of these mentalities and ideologies out here that personally, while I do think it makes sense as to why we've gotten here, there's a lot of stuff that men are being taught that it's just kind of like it's obviously a bunch of nonsense. Men being taught all this stuff about like avoiding women, not talking to them, or this whole belief that you need to be an alpha to do certain things in your life, right? And so there's a higher concentration, I believe, among men about not looking bad, about protecting the ego, about looking like you've got it all together before you finally step out to do certain things. But then there's another side of it that's speaking to women, that essentially is saying this is what your idea of a woman looks like, about this strong, independent female that, you basically don't need a man. Or it's this whole thing of, hey, you can do everything. You can have the corporate boss woman lifestyle, and you can have the relationship, all that. And while those are in some ways important things to talk about, I believe that what it does is that it isolates the fact that we as human beings are social creatures. And this whole ideology of we don't, guys being like, oh, we don't need girls, we can do our whole thing, or girls being like, we don't need a man. It's so flawed. It's so mistaken in its premise, because each and every one of us are product of a man and a woman getting together to have a child. So that's just part of our biology. It's part of how we got here. But more importantly, I think that if we start becoming like almost tribalist, but within the genders that we are in, or whatever that we attribute to ourselves, it's going to lack balance. And that's what you're seeing. The lack of people feeling like they're connected to one another is being showcased here. I want to pull up another thing here for you guys that I was reading about. And right over here, loneliness statistics, just in the United States alone. 1 in 4 adults in the United States are reporting feeling lonely in 2020. Well, that was in 2024. That's like a very recent statistic here. Young adults between the ages of 18 and 34 have the highest prevalence of loneliness, with 30% reporting feelings of isolation. Women are slightly more likely than men to report loneliness. That's 33% versus 30%. And we know this because women just tend to be better at creating, groups where they can kind of like deal with these issues, or basically coping with these issues around loneliness. Women also just tend to be a lot better at speaking up and talking to one another as well when they feel like they are going through a rough time. And women are a lot better at putting support groups together. Men also, whether it's due to stigmas that exist, or also just due to the way that we've been socialized. A lot of times when, little girls are going through painful moments or difficult moments, and they are allowed at a young age to express pain a lot more directly. If you're a guy and you're going through maybe a situation where you might fall off of a bike and scrape your knee, or you're playing sports and you hurt yourself, there's a lot more stigma and thinking around this, where it's like, hey, get it together, man up, that you don't see with women. And so a lot of times guys are not going to necessarily express that as directly as women will. And then also just in Black and Hispanic racial groups, they have higher rates of loneliness compared to that of white counterparts. So of course we know that these levels have really gone up since the pandemic. But I believe that social media, while we have been trying to be more connected as a society, social media also plays a part in this, because we are getting stuck in our own algorithms, and it doesn't really put an emphasis on us meeting one another and connecting. The reason that I say all of this is because loneliness and isolation have many times been correlated with growth. And while I think that that's a part of growth, I don't think that it's necessary for us to completely isolate ourselves. And I just want to say this to a lot of young men out there. This whole idea that you need to be an alpha, that you need to isolate yourself. We have this idea that being alpha just means to dominate, that being alpha means that you are, just crushing everybody else that's around you, and that you are the lone sole authority, and that is what attracts and draws people to you. That's kind of an idea that I feel like leadership that we've seen specifically in the world, in the political world, with people, like Trump or some of these other people that have been out there. We get this idea that being masculine or being super alpha is just shutting other people down, never showing weakness, never admitting that you've done the wrong thing. And then we seek to demonstrate that in our friendships and relationships. But I want to tell you today, that is a misconception. And the real true definition of being a man, despite everything that you're seeing out there, being a man means, number one, having integrity. It means sticking to what you say. It means, like, if you commit to do something, no matter how inconvenient it is for you to do so, you stick to those beliefs, right? That you treat the other people in your life with respect, that you listen to people, you consider what other people are saying, and you focus on being somebody who celebrates and includes a lot of other viewpoints and beliefs and shows respect while still having your own beliefs and fighting for what you think is right, even when it's inconvenient. It is not trend-based. It is not we celebrate what's popular today, and then when it's not popular anymore, we don't talk about it. But it does give you the opportunity to look back on a past version of yourself and say, I can grow. I used to think these things, but then I changed my mind because I learned and I had opportunities to evolve as a human being. That's what it truly means to be a man. Being a man means to celebrate and inspire other people around you to be better versions of themselves and to stand up to evil, to stand up to darkness, to stand up to people that are bullies, to stand up to people that criticize and make other people feel small. That's what being a true man looks like. Being a true man does not mean that you're putting down another woman. It does not mean that you have to make her feel small or take her rights away for you to be great. Being a true man means that you can look at another woman as your equal, that you can see her just like you are part of two human beings that came together. You can see a woman as part of the equation for making this world a better place. And I'm not just talking about in the business sense, but also socially in a relationship, in the home, as part of the family dynamic. And that you help to nurture that woman and appreciate the fact that she has feminine energy, you have masculine energy, so on and so forth, however that comes to be. But I believe that if more men out there, if we were to take this stance and realize that our masculinity can show in different forms and it's supposed to be a constructive force and not a destructive force, that is when I believe we would actually see a better world and we would grow to be the type of humans that we want to be. I also think that it looks like facing your trauma. It looks like facing your problems, facing the demons that are in your closet, and coming to terms with the fact that this version of you today is not the best version of you. And so I just want to speak to all the young men that are out there. It is important for us to recognize that, yes, sometimes it is going to be lonely. Okay, what does that look like? I want to talk to that for a little bit here. Sometimes growth looks like loneliness, and sometimes loneliness looks like growth when you have to say no to a group of friends that maybe you don't want to do drugs anymore, or maybe you want to live a better life. Maybe you want to stop being negative all the time. And maybe you actually want to take a step towards the dreams that you've been holding back on for fear. It doesn't mean that the people that are in your life are bad people. It just means they're choosing a different path. And you have to decide within yourself, what do I want for my life? Ultimately, do I see myself in the next 10 years being the person that is not just talking about acting, or not just talking about making a record, or not just talking about starting a business or investing or saving money, but I actually am living that life that I want to live? So what's that going to look like? Maybe I don't want to go out or can't go out with all my friends every single weekend that just want to get drunk and that just want to get wasted. Maybe that means looking like in this season of my life, I'm actually getting serious about what I want. And maybe that looks like setting a list of boundaries out for yourself and saying, this is what it's going to take for me to get there. Maybe it means saying, hey, listen, some of y'all want to go out, you want to eat junk food and do this stuff, but I want to get in shape. I want to be physically fit. I want to take care of myself. So I'm going to save my time, or I'm going to cook at home, or I'm not going to go out and do these things. And sometimes you'll be made fun of. Sometimes you'll be criticized. Sometimes you have to be alone. But can I just submit to you today that as you separate yourself from certain people, places, and things that don't match what you want in life, now is not the time to then shut the door on new connections. You just need to replace those people that you're choosing to step away from with people that are willing to do the same things that you want to do. So find yourself a couple of people, some small groups of people. It may even just be one friend. Find yourself that one person that cares about going to the gym. Find yourself that one person that's going to hold you accountable and say, listen, this is what we agreed to. Are you eating healthy? Are you hitting maybe your macros and micros? I don't know what you're doing, but even if it's just going to the gym 3 times a week, are you meeting up with somebody or connecting with somebody or finding a community of people that you know will encourage you to steward those habits, right? And I think the thing about this is too, sometimes we feel bad about abandoning. Oh, maybe I'm abandoning my friends. I would encourage you, don't abandon people. It's not about abandoning so much or feeling that guilt, but it's just creating enough space to say, I need to realign what I'm doing in my life, because you sometimes have to know how to create distance and then sometimes exit relationships gracefully. And that's obviously a really, really difficult thing when you have tons of memories with people. Maybe you're a people pleaser and you're like, but I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. But can I just submit to you that sometimes the right thing for you to do to even spark growth in someone else's life while you're working on your own is to hurt some feelings. Sometimes you can't please all the people in your life. In fact, not even sometimes. You cannot please everyone in your life when you are trying to become a better person. But it requires you having enough knowledge and enough self-respect to say, hey, maybe I can't keep this person in my life because I'm trying to grow. And this person is actually a barrier to me advancing to the next level that I want to go on. And so what does that look like? Charting out the boundaries in your life, charting out what you want your life to look like, who you want to be. If we don't set these spaces and boundaries for these spaces in our life, we're never going to progress. And I know that's what you want to do today. You want to grow. You want to become the next best person that you can be. And the only way you can do that is by taking time to reflect. So I think that, and as we've talked about this before, every new comfort zone that we were in was once an uncomfortable space. And every new cage that we find ourselves in was once a comfort zone. So we kind of go from these little spaces where first it was an uncomfortable zone, then it became a comfort zone, and then it became a cage, right? You may have, let's say you were working a job that was at the office all the time. And you're like, man, I just hope that, my next job is a remote job. I want more freedom. I want to be able to do whatever I want. And then you finally found that job. That was a little uncomfortable at first, right? There were sure comforts of it, right? But then there were things that were uncomfortable or that you had to adapt to. And then pretty soon you might tell yourself, you know what? I'm not around anybody anymore. I'm always at home. I'm always working. That space that was once uncomfortable for you then became a comfort zone because you could sit there, you could brew your coffee and have the camera off while you're in the middle of the meeting, and you don't have to always show up or be in the office, or you could do a hour workout while you were on your lunch break and then come back home and still be part of that meeting while you're trying to clearly I've done remote work before because this was me, right? But what happens when these spots in our lives that were once comfort zones become cages? When your comfort zone becomes a cage, you have to know, despite the guilt you might feel of leaving a job or leaving a relationship because you feel like that person might be holding you back from becoming the best version of who you could be, or you feel like it's an unhealthy dynamic, you have to learn to recognize when the experiences that you're having in your life that have so many trappings, because we've heard this before, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Sometimes that in and of itself can be the very thing that holds you back from becoming the best person that you want to be. So I want you this week, look through your life, look at spaces where you're finding that what was once a comfort zone for you has now become a cage. Because it's important for us to always evaluate where we are keeping ourselves back as well, not just people in our lives that aren't respecting boundaries or that don't understand where we're going. But how do we let go sometimes of spaces that also feel like comfort zones for us, but are actually prisons? Okay. And then just finally here, I just want to talk to you guys about this a little bit. A lot of times procrastinating when we know that we need to leave circumstances, situations, or we actually need to start projects, programs, or just take that bold leap of faith, we procrastinate, we overcommit, or we start experiencing self-doubt. I just want to tell you today, this is normal. It's totally normal for you to feel this way. It's totally normal for you to hesitate. It's totally normal for you to feel like there's stuff that's happening in your life and you don't want to take that leap of faith because maybe something's being taken away from you, or you're afraid of this new horizon that feels like it's just so new. But can I submit to you today that sometimes growth feels subtractive before it's additive? Can I submit to you that sometimes change feels like pain before it's promise? Can I submit to you that sometimes growth feels like a chain before it is something that launches you out into the new challenge that turns you into a champion? Can I submit to you that sometimes when you're replacing old habits with intentional behaviors, that sometimes it feels like a setback rather than a comeback? Ultimately, it's not so much about what we go through. It's so much about us reframing what we see this period of growth and sometimes loneliness as. Loneliness, I believe, if you shift the perspective, loneliness can really be reshaped into the quiet space between your old and future self. And that loneliness, or that space where you don't have other people to distract you, because I'm one of those people sometimes. I have used my busyness to silence all the noise that's going on between my ears, where I feel like I don't want to deal with these uncomfortable things in my life, these thoughts of things that I need to address. But can I just submit to you that that is the space between your old and future self, and my old and future self, that if the work was to be done, I believe that we would both emerge as different people that are ready to take on the challenges that we once thought were impossible and insurmountable. I believe that solitude can sharpen our purpose rather than signal failure in our life. And there have been so many stories of people that have gone through losing everything, losing friends, having somebody steal an idea from them or cheat them out of something. And from that, they were able to start again. And what felt like loneliness, what felt like brokenness, what felt like your whole life was over, it's actually the opportunity for a new chapter to be written in your life. And so I would just encourage you in this time, build your growth circle intentionally. Look around you this week and in the coming weeks as we're about to go into the fall season here with summer wrapping up. Look around you and say, what do I want to change with this next quarter of the year right around the corner? What do I want to do to make a difference in my life and signal the change that I say that I want? Start with what you want from your life, and then start with what you feel is getting in the way with you. Because I know it's really easy for us to point the finger and say, oh, look at them, they're holding me back. This person over here, they're an obstacle to me. But start with yourself. Start with you by looking at the person in the mirror and making the world a better place by starting with yourself. And say, where do I want to grow? And then as you're doing this, begin to surround yourself with people who have the same goals. They want to be intentional with their friendships. They want to be more intentional about creating community and doing things together, not just for some business thing or not just to grow our brand, because I know that's very popular in LA. We just hang out with people that we are hanging out with that because they want to grow their brand or it's a business opportunity. But what if we began to have more intentional connections with people just surrounding who they are and how we contribute to making one another feel when we leave each other's presence? Do we feel more empowered when we leave our friends? Do we feel more encouraged to continue the pursuits that we're working on outside of these spaces because of the people that we're surrounding ourselves with? I want to encourage you. Let's make our lives about the growth that we're experiencing and the changes that we're having as a result of being intentional and specific and full of purpose about where we're trying to go and who we want to come along the journey. Because like my friend that I was sitting at that table with the other night and reflecting on the many years that we've known each other, I believe we can still have people in our lives that we can look back 10, 15, 20 years from now at different stages of growth in our life and say, all the change that I made in my life and you being part of it, it was so worth it. Listen, that's all the time that I have for today. If you guys have any comments or any thoughts about what we've talked about today on the podcast, or if you want to hear a particular topic, anything that you specifically want to sound off about, go ahead, shoot us a DM on Instagram at Instagram. Whoa, not Instagram. Go ahead and shoot us a DM on Instagram at _full_circle_pod, and go ahead and leave us a comment on TikTok at Full Circle Pod. And if you're watching here on YouTube or listening on Spotify, go ahead and follow us and subscribe, like, and leave us a comment. That's all the time that I have for today. Thank you again for listening. And remember, growth isn't about loss. It's about becoming who you always were meant to be and growing yourself to be able to have more capacity for what is meant for you. That's all the time I have for today. As I always say, have a great one from your favorite brother. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.